Hey, welcome back to the Big Esports Podcast. In this episode, I think what we'll call this is an esports history lesson with Charles Conroy, who's currently with The Switch. You might have heard me talk about the illustrious and massive Championship Gaming Series, which ran from 2007 to 2008. Back in the day, it was a live streamed with a live studio audience in a live studio, Counter-Strike and multiple other game competition where players were paid full salaries and the spending was quite intense. We break down this, we talk about esports at the Olympics, where esports is heading, where it's come from, how much money people used to earn back in the day versus now, and so much more. I really enjoyed this episode. Charles is a fantastic guy and he's been around in esports much longer than many of us have. So it's time to take out your notepad and listen. Enjoy. Charles, mate, how are you?
Hey man, how you doing? Thank you for taking the time and getting up early. I know it's time zones can be a struggle.
No worries at all, man. No worries at all. It's the hardest thing is when we're out of daylight savings and you guys are in daylight savings, especially for something like New York. I think it's 8 a.m. my time is 6 p.m. their time. So it can get pretty rough here in Australia.
Yeah. Well, appreciate you getting up early.
No worries, man. And it's good that we got to reschedule this too after having some tech problems last time. But you know, I guess when I originally invited you on, I had like a theme of like a lot of the content that I was doing on LinkedIn at the time, which was I want to learn about esports and its history. You know, some people I think from the outside call me an OG in esports, but I don't see myself that way. You know, I kind of started as a player in around 2008. Obviously, if you look at the millions of decks that are around for esports, it started back in the 70s, but I think it really kicked off in the 2000s. But for you, I see you as a bit more of an OG because by 2007 you were already working in the professional league. So I'd love to kick off this chat with just like an elevator pitch as to your history, like in the esports and gaming space, and some of the roles you've held and where you are at today.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. It was 16 years of my life, or 17 years at this point. I started as a player when I was 15 years old, playing a game called Counter-Strike. I'm sure we've all heard of it. I got together with some of my friends, and we went to an event called CPL in 2002. We didn't do very well. We lost 2 games, but we had a blast in like the BYOC area, and I kind of realized right then that this was going to be a big thing and that I wasn't going to be good enough to be as good as some of the other guys there. So I walked around and I just met people. I put together a little team and I said, next year I will pay for the team's travel to CPL. No salaries or anything at that point, but I got some cash together and I paid for these guys to go down. We had 2 hotel rooms. 3 out of the 5 guys drove. It wasn't like a ton of money compared to now, but we went back and we won 1 game. I didn't play on the team at this time. And then I realized, look, I really got to take this seriously. So I started reaching out to sponsors. I got a corporate sponsor. I got much better players. And then we came back and we started, coming in number 1, number 2, number 3 at tournaments all around the country. That's when JMC was born. After that, we got picked up for some international tournaments where travel was paid for. We went and filmed a TV show in Korea called WEG, and that was in 2005. We then, after WEG, came back to CPL and came in 3rd, beating the likes of SK and NIP. We actually knocked Complexity out of that tournament. We beat pretty much every team in the world. Actually, we didn't beat SK that tournament, but we did beat NIP when they had Heaton. I remember because we lost SK. So yeah, that was a big moment. Then we went to the Esports World Cup and represented the United States and kind of spent time traveling around the world playing Counter-Strike. It was at that time the Championship Gaming Series came about, which was DirecTV's attempt at a franchise league. Very big deal in the US. There had never been a linear TV league before. And they had all this money and these NFL producers and the guys that did NASCAR were behind it. It was exciting, right? So everybody wanted to be in the CGS. I was a little worried I wouldn't get the look, even though I was one of the best managers in the world from a success level because I was 19 at that point. But I did. And I was the 8th manager hired out of the 8 managers in Championship Gaming Series, the youngest manager by about 9 years. And I ran the Dallas Venom. The Dallas Venom was sort of this edgier, cool team. We did not have a lot of success the first season. I learned from my mistakes. I changed some rosters around. Unfortunately, I cut some players I was very close with, and we came back and we were the strongest team in the world the next season. There was 18 teams added season 2. We were living like rock stars. Honestly, CGS was amazing, and I'm sure we'll dive into it later. But we all had apartments in LA and cars and livable wages. The draft was at the Playboy Mansion. season 2 was at South by Southwest. There's all these celebrities involved. It was crazy. Like, it was the craziest thing at the time, going from hotel ballrooms to that. Unfortunately, CGS folded. They went through about $50 million in 2 years. The burn rate was crazy high. And at that point, a good friend of mine, Jason Lake, he's still one of my best friends to this day, and I decided to reform a team called Complexity. There was also an operations guy named Jason Bass who used to own gotfrag.com back in the day, and he joined us. So 3 of us reformed Complexity. We didn't really have any money. Well, not really. We had no money. We had $0. So we had all these stars that were on TV for the last 2 years. And we knew they had value. We knew esports had value. So I actually flew to CES, Consumer Electronics Show, with just 12 pitch decks. Then I went up to probably 120 booths and just cold pitch Complexity to every single one of them. Luckily, a few of them were familiar with the show. Creative Labs, who made this headset, actually just was like, we'll do it. And on the floor of CES on the last day, said they'd be the title sponsor for the team. Complexity was reborn. It was really exciting for all of us. And sort of the rest is history with that. We spent 8 years, bringing Complexity back to greatness. They're obviously doing very well now. 2.5 years ago, we sold Complexity to the Dallas Cowboys, which was, probably the most exciting moment of my life. And at that point, I was a free agent. I did some hosting for MLG and Call of Duty. I was a floor reporter for that. I hosted a couple shows on the MLG network. And then I was tapped by the Switch. I wanted a job opportunity that combined sports and gaming, right? And the Switch is the world's largest live event broadcaster. So we transmit everything from the Super Bowl to the PGA tournament to the Olympics, from point A all around the world to whoever's buying the TV rights. We deliver that signal. And lately, we've been a huge production company, so we're producing events as well, from a broadcast perspective. So we have all sorts of products that a tournament can use to produce a live event. So they hired me to run gaming. Proud to say in the last 2 years, we've gone from not being in esports to being the world leader. So it's been a really exciting new adventure. I had to definitely learn new technologies and a new role. And I knew nothing about broadcast. And now, thankfully, I know enough to keep me dangerous. So
Fantastic.
That's the past 16 years of my life, man.
Man, good summary. And on that last point, we're definitely gonna have to chat after this call. I'm working on a project. Maybe we can do some stuff together. But
Awesome.
It was cool to see those names, I guess, sprinkled throughout. And I think even for me, I didn't realize that the CGS was at that level, that it was. So it's probably, I guess one of the easiest ways to start is, you were saying, as far back as what, 2007, 2005, you guys were on a TV show in Korea.
Yeah, '05, we were on a TV show in Korea with a player village. So it was a weird time. I actually didn't travel with the team. 2 days before I was supposed to go to Korea with the guys, my lung collapsed and I was in the hospital for 8 days.
Oh, wow.
Pretty gnarly. But so I couldn't go with them. And unfortunately, by the time I healed up and could fly, they were knocked out of the tournament. But they came back. We made a couple of roster changes and then had the legendary CPL run that people talked about for a long time.
So it's crazy, I mean, pre CGS collapsing in 2008, I was doing a little bit Googling around. The CPL back in 2008 had a $300,000 prize pool. You're talking about TV shows in Korea. You're talking about 2007, 2008, these players living like rock stars. But I mean, if you fast forward even to 2014, 2015, it feels like esports wasn't even at that level then. So what gives? Was there a recession because of the GFC? Was it people spending too much money too early? And I think there's a few things to unpack in there.
Yeah. So touching on the CPL, right? It's easy to have big prize payments if you don't pay them. So,
Yeah.
I'm personally owed a lot of money by CPL. I know a lot of people are. Angel Munez started a company and basically overpromised, underdelivered. I think that hurt gaming overall because the CPL was sort of speaking of hope. I think CGS folding after they spent $50 million and had News Corp behind them hurt gaming. Certainly in the United States, people were afraid to touch it, right? They said, if you can't do it with $50 million and the backing of News Corp, this isn't going to work. It was a very dark time to be in esports, and a lot of people left. So a lot of people from that era, that's when you saw them exit stage left there. Luckily Lake and I had each other and Jason Bass, and we kind of supported each other. Guys like Craig Levine came up big during that time. Craig is obviously the godfather and another one of my very good friends. So, those of us that stuck around are in good places now. but it was a dark time in esports. The global financial crisis didn't help. The fact that a few people had tarnished the reputation of the entire industry and its commercial viability didn't help. And so a few of us picked up the pieces, and then Twitch came about. And when Twitch came about, everything changed. And everyone asked what was the catalyst, and it was 100% the advent of Twitch. The numbers that were appearing on Twitch were insane, and outside investors, sports teams, marketing agencies, everyone took notice again, and they go, "Oh man, I think this is a viable business." And that's what you see today, is that rocket ship of an influx of cash.
And one of the other really interesting things you're talking about is, you were able to rely on the fact that you guys, had a lot of players on TV to kind of catapult complexity and to get those partnerships in. And this is something that I go back and look at every now and then. It's so much harder, I think, for people in the old to reinvent in the new pre-social media. If you go back and you try to find, DSN from Fnatic's social media presence, a world championship player who won everything for 2 years with an all-star team, he's got almost nothing on Instagram and Twitter because those platforms either didn't exist or weren't really popular throughout that time at all. But, if you're looking at a player today, if a Fallen retires or someone like that, well, I mean, he's already got 6, 7, 800K on Twitter. So he can reinvent himself as an influencer in another realm.
Totally.
Does that add an extra level of, dare I say it, complexity to the situation?
Yeah, it's funny. Harley has become one of my best friends in the world, and whenever I go to Asia for work, I hang out with Harley, and
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. Yeah.
awesome guy. And he has reinvented himself. It's because he's a good dude and a smart guy, but it's not because he was a world championship gamer. He's just a smart guy that's still working in the space. But you could say that about a ton of the old Rockstar players that you probably maybe have heard of, but were like the best in the game during back in the day. So it's the world's a different place. Social media is a game changer. Instagram, Twitter, we're not around, and that makes being famous a little easier, to be honest.
And I think you even find that with sports stars, right? I was talking to a sports celebrity who's getting back into the esports space who played, for one of the largest English clubs, back in the 2000s. But once again, almost no social presence because what were people using in the 2000s? A bit of MySpace, and obviously that doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah, maybe the newspaper.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's crazy. So can you explain a little bit more then about the non-payment of prize pools in esports? I think we've seen that come out a little bit more. We've experienced that a bit here in Australia, but thankfully for us, most of the non-paid prize pools are more in the 10, the 20K rather than sitting around the 300K realm. And I know there are a few people in the market now that are providing insurances for prize pools that are trying to guarantee prize pools, and there's a lot of associations coming out as well to try to combat against that. But I'd love to learn a little bit more from your angle as to how how any organization could promise such a large prize pool and then simply just not pay it out for the next 10 years.
Yeah. So with the CPL, they declared bankruptcy, told that everyone that they couldn't pay. And you have to realize it's not like we had huge sponsors. Like, even though we had sponsors, I was still out of pocket. So not only did we not get the prize money that I was going to pay myself back with and then pay the players with, we were in the hole. We were negative money on tournaments, which was rough. But they declared bankruptcy. Another entity bought it. They tried to relaunch it. They declared bankruptcy. Then another entity bought it. And it became this really like toxic brand, which is a shame because I credit the CPL with launching esports as we see it today. They were huge. And, you screw someone over once in any industry, they'll remember it. But you do it twice and something as small as esports and you're gone, So it was an unfortunate thing at a time where cash was not readily available. So it hurt, man. Those non-payments really stung at the time.
And it's quite common these days to see, even top tier 2 level teams selling a sponsorship for, say 500K US a year for a fronted jersey, a main sponsorship. You're seeing sponsorships multiple years into the millions now. But, you're talking about sponsorship back in 2008, if you guys are competing on the global circuit in IEMs and CGSs, how much could you expect from a brand like an MSI or a Razer or kind of these stalwarts of the esports industry?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, sponsorships were anywhere between $1,500 to 10 grand a month. So a big deal was like 10 G's a month, and that was for like a title sponsor. And a starter deal would be about $1,500, and that's for the whole team. So the numbers were just different. Guys were getting paid $500 a month. Um, and part of that is to your point, they didn't have the social outreach and that marketing platform that having 800K on Twitter gets you.
Mm,
So players are almost more valuable now, not because they're better players, but because they're marketing vehicles for these
mm.
products. You're not just slapping a logo on a jersey anymore.
And I think one of the other major things too is that you don't, in esports these days, you don't have to rely so much on those prize pools, like you were saying, to cover your costs. You can rely a little bit more on the sponsorship money coming through and the side money coming through from the personal streaming and personal sponsorships to be able to pay your way. Because obviously, relying on prize pools not a fantastic way to conduct a business when you don't know if you're going to win or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with Twitch and these streamers, they're marketers in their own right.
Hmm.
The players have much more of an individual brand now than they had in the past, and you're seeing them get paid 25K a month. So winning money is awesome, and obviously they want to win, but they don't need that money to pay bills.
Yeah, yeah, that's really true. So, I guess going from the CPL, and actually one last point I had here for the CPL, if anyone would like to Google it as well, there's just a good Wikipedia summary of it. But you can see like when that sale took place after the bankruptcy. So in 2008, they ran a tournament with a $300,000 prize pool in two arguably quite questionable esports titles, Fear and World in Conflict. And then in 2011, they dropped down to a $26,000 prize pool, so less than 10% of their
Yeah.
final. So you can see it change hands. And the other thing, or I guess the main thing really that I wanted to talk about so much, which I think is completely forgotten for most people in esports, which is the Championship Gaming Series. So a really quick recap.
Ouch, completely forgotten.
Yeah, and I don't think in a good way, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, right? Because I think there's so many lessons that we need to learn from that haven't been, that have been completely forgotten by the industry. And I guess like a recap for anyone watching once again. So the Championship Gaming Series was like a worldwide franchise league. There was even a team in Australia. There was the Sydney Underground. There was teams in London, in Berlin, in America, all over the world. And it was played live in a studio with a live studio audience. There were ring girls walking around with cards. There was, arguably kind of the first ever famous professional gamer, Jonathan Fatality Wendell was one of the main stage commentators for it, and some other massive names in the esports industry as well. The players were paid salaries. They were all playing in live in a studio, and like you said, they were being compensated quite well. There was large prize pools, and the game was Counter-Strike Source that was being played in there. But you also said, they burned through $50 million in 2 years. So I'd be interested to learn from you a little bit more. Like that's a very high level overview of kind of how the tournament worked. But I'd be really interested to learn from you, like what did they do right?
Yeah. So you can ask Red Eye or DJ Wheat or Fatality or Jason. Like, if you were part of the Championship Gaming Series, it was the coolest thing that's ever happened to us at the time. Obviously, players
Mm,
went from making $500 a month to 30 grand a year guaranteed. With prize money, a player could make 100 grand a year. Again, from $500 a month. This is legitimate prize money. Your housing was paid for. We had a team car to take around. They got per diem for food and whatever living expenses. And they lived in LA on the beach for 7 weeks. It was awesome. The GMs got paid. Well, first off, we got paid. I went from losing money running a gaming team as a passion to making more money than any of my friends living in a college dorm room. And again, I was the youngest one in the league. Like people were supporting families on these salaries. It was a legitimate league, and it's what we had finally been waiting for. Um,
mm,
Now, so if you were involved, it was great. Some problems. They didn't stick to the original game formats. They tried to make it fit. I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cold, so my
that's
voice
right.
cracks. I have gone through puberty. I checked. But yeah, look, the trying to fit esports into a 90-minute format and changing the format of a game like Counter Strike doesn't work.
Mm,
Um, they had some auxiliary games that weren't super popular. They didn't go with super popular titles. The scoring system was fairly flawed because Counter Strike was heavily weighted, where a game like FIFA, where you're supposed to get just as excited about, you could maybe win a point or two out of what would be an average of 30 or so points.
mm,
Um, so that wasn't great. They they spent too much money. I mean, we all had our own apartments in LA. The players bunked together in like 2-bedroom apartments, but um, again, you're going from $500 a month to 30 grand a year guaranteed. there's a delta there that players would have still taken, right? I mean, had you gone $1,000 a month, and I don't want the players being paid. I think they should have paid us too. Um, you could have maybe gotten a little more out of it. The
Mm,
production staff that they brought in, while being amazing at what they did, were some of the best in the industry. But they're not the best in the esports industry. They're the best in football or NASCAR. So you're bringing in these professionals that are used to making X, which is a lot, and you're still paying them X, but they're learning a whole new format. So I just think the idea was right and the heart was in it, and they're really good people to work with.
mm,
Um, but just the way they spent money was like a bunch of drunken sailors. And um, the only thing I will remember is a real negative of the CGS. And again, a lot of people disliked it. If you weren't involved, I don't think you really get it. And I say that with all respect in my heart. They're like, oh, they're screwing up the game format and they're screwing up player salaries. And that's probably all true. But if you were in that bubble, it was awesome. Um, and the one thing that I'll really left a bad taste in my mouth is the way they shut down the league was they just posted a message on the website one day. I woke up, and my then girlfriend at the time was like, is the league shut down? And I go, what do you mean? And everyone's Facebook statuses was like, goodbye CGS, like cry emoji. And I was like, I don't think it's shut down. I go to the website and it just
mm.
says we've ceased operations. And there's no email to the GMs. I have all my players calling me. They're freaking out. Frankly, I'm freaking out. Um, and we get an invite for a call like 5 hours later with no answers yet. We get on the call and they're just like, "Hey guys, we decided not to go ahead with season 3. Um, sorry, it was a good effort." That was it. So from all this
Mm.
build up and this truly amazing life changing thing, and I think anyone involved will tell you it changed their life because it was that great. Uh, really shitty way to end it, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah.
Really, really bad way to drop the ball. So again, when that happened, a lot of people felt esports was toxic. If News Corp can't get it done with 50 million, how's it going to happen? And it took the U.S. specifically a long time to recover.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess that's the too hard too early or spending too much too early is something that we've seen in pretty much every scene in esports, right?
Yeah,
Everyone's
absolutely.
tried that from too big influencer houses to spending too much money on prize pool to spending too much money on salaries. And there was an example that we talked about here where there was this one team in Australia that used to exist that I think is probably the sole team that's responsible for the overinflation of wages. We're either in the single game they played or in the whole industry where they were under the guise of, well, I want to support my players as much as possible. So I'm going to pay them fantastic, above minimum wage salaries, which is, minimum wage is esports wage a lot of the time. But unfortunately, it meant that they couldn't afford operations staff. They couldn't afford a sales team. They couldn't afford social media managers. And the team folded within a year because out of the, as a high flying guest, they're 600K. They burned through that in a year or so because, under the guise of looking after their players. But you're not looking after your players if you don't have a business anymore.
I mean, yeah, that's exactly what happened with CGS. And like I said, they could have scaled back. We told them we'd take pay cuts. We were worried, and it was always, listen, guys, you have a 3-year commitment from DirecTV. You have a 3-year commitment, and
Mm,
I guess we didn't. I mean, we were
yeah.
scheduled to fly out to LA 9 days from the time the league got canceled to make league-wide
Oh.
decisions on season 3. Um, it was nuts, man. It was obviously a decision that had been in the making for a while, but
Mm.
unfortunate, but upwards and onwards.
So obviously, back in 2008, live streaming was basically non-existent online. Most people didn't have a good enough internet connection to watch it, even though it did kind of exist, or just, especially stream it. So everything was based around TV, and obviously you've mentioned direct TV a few times as well. So is that why the format was how it was? For example, all the broadcasts were done in third-person view, which is annoying because in Counter-Strike, you can watch things in first person, which is fantastic. You can see the strategies much better. You can see how people are controlling the character and aiming. You said there are other formats where it was, changing to the limited amount of rounds, for example. It wasn't the regular, 30 rounds to win style format, and there was other ways that it was played. So was all that adapted purely just to be a TV broadcast?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think first person is a little more violent than third person in CS. And
Yeah, that's
number
true.
two, I think that, yeah, I mean, and look, it's a first person game. They would do replays in first person, but the entire broadcast was in third person to give it more of a sports appeal and
Hmm.
again to reduce on screen violence.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Because yeah, it made me think a lot. Even in those days, watching. I guess that's when I started to learn about Counter Strike Source was with them, and learning a little bit about Sydney Underground. And I can see here live in the LinkedIn chat we got Scotty Boomser who played
Boomser.
and got in trouble quite a lot for yelling a bit too loud on
Oh,
stream.
big fan of that guy. Big fan.
Yeah, and it was always interesting as to why it was in third person, and thinking if I was to watch hockey or the NFL or basketball, would I watch it in first person if I had an opportunity? And I'd say I probably would. It was always intriguing to me why they decided to go with a third person format.
Yeah, I mean, I think again they got guys that were very good at what they did, but what they did was not esports.
And I guess you've highlighted an important thing that I've talked so much about recently, which is how do you marry together the traditional industry and the esports industry? I think it's obviously extremely important to have people from the esports industry when you're trying to push a company forwards, because they're going to understand what the viewers want, which is ultimately what brings in the money. They're going to understand the trends in the market and such. But there's also an advantage to bring in traditional business people because they have access to funding, they've got access to brands, and they've also got the degrees and the experience. But at what level do you put in that esports, and at what level do you put in the the rest? How does that kind of function in your experience, trying to marry together those two worlds?
I think you have to marry the two worlds. If you have a let's take teams for example, right? Because that's what I did for a billion years of my life, is run teams. If you have it be all esports people, and you don't bring in those salespeople, or you don't bring in the people with the business acumen to get you to the next level or help you fundraise, you'll fail. We've seen teams that are super corporate and they're people that don't understand esports and they fail. You need a good mix of both, and esports is at a professional level where you don't have just one world or the other. I mean, esports is a true entertainment industry. It's a true an esports team specifically is an apparel brand. There's an entertainment company. It's a talent agency. It's everything. So you need people with different skill sets to complement each other.
Yeah, that's really true. There's a really good question that's come through the chat as well. One that I wish I kind of thought of myself, which was about we're kind of learning about the problems with the past right now, and a lot of it really is just too big too early. Are there any current worrying trends that you see in esports today that might affect our growth over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is going to be a popular answer since I do work with a lot of leagues, but I think that it's when you pay $30 million for a team slot, it's hard to recover that cash right now. Now, maybe look, the Houston Outlaws sold for $40 million, right? So their spot went up in value. And I think a lot of people point to that. So is $30 million a lot 10 years down the line? No, not with the growth that's going on right now, but you have to realize it's a long-term play. So let me clarify that answer just so I don't upset the wrong people. Do I think an esports team is worth $30 million right now? Not if you expect to make that cash back in 3 to 5 years, right? But if you believe in the long-term play here, which is what you should be doing, if you're spending that kind of dough, yeah, I mean, if you could buy the Clippers for $50 million 30 years ago, you'd do it. But I do think the team prices right now are heavy. And I think some of the seed funding that goes into esports companies, because it's a buzzword, there's a lot of dumb money coming in to companies that don't necessarily deserve it. And there's some amazing esports companies out there that aren't getting funded. I think esports is a big buzzword with VCs right now. And so they're throwing cash right away because they figure they have to get an esports. And I have buddies at VCs that send me decks, and I'm like, I wouldn't do that. So what I'm worried about is bad cash coming in to ideas that don't deserve funding simply because they want to be in the space, and then seeing a crash and having that be a bad look on the industry. So just to clarify, I think esports is an amazing industry. I'm going to be in it for the rest of my life. I fully support it. I just think people, when they invest in it, should be smart about what they invest in, just like they would be smart about anything else.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess, to back up what you were saying, talking to AEG, who do hold some of those franchise positions, they likened it very similar to the MLS. They bought in quite heavily to Major League Soccer in the US, but they said that they saw that as a 10, 15, 20-year play.
Right.
and something that you're not looking to get back straight away. And I would agree. I mean, if you look at the Forbes articles and talking to some of my friends who are privy to the information of these esports teams, those multiples are quite accurate. A lot of these teams are functioning on 7 to 22x multiples when they're raising capital, and obviously a company is worth what people are willing to invest. But
100%.
can the market really back that up? And a lot of times, the answer is no.
Well, in esports, it's not like you're buying a product and you're investing 3x revenue. You're buying futures in an entertainment industry, and you're willing to take those multiples because you believe in the industry long term. And I've met some people that have made that play, and I think they're going to make a lot of money. I've also met some people in this time that are like, I can't believe I haven't got my money back. It's been 2 years, and that blows my mind because obviously there was research that was not done to make these timeline expectations in their heads.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, you got to invest into esports for the long term play. And there's been so much discussion around the franchise leagues, and for me, with my content, I haven't really had a position kind of sitting on either side. I know that my lawyer, and I had a lot of discussions with him, who's an esports lawyer, Matt Jessup, who's very strong on IP, is very for franchise leagues. But it is scary, like you were saying, when you're looking at $25 million to buy into Call of Duty, which is arguably almost a tier 2 esport if you purely just look at the viewership metrics in history. It does become a hard sell unless there's some really strong support from Blizzard behind there. And hey, look, there's been some articles come out, and I've covered that as well on LinkedIn recently, about Blizzard looking to financially support the teams that might be struggling due to coronavirus and stuff too. But it definitely is a two-way street, and it's hard when you, like you said, with DirecTV, you were always told it's a 3-year deal, it's a 3-year deal, it's a 3-year deal. I've got another friend that was in a franchise style league in a global esport, and I can't mention who it is, but he had very similar. He was raising capital off the fact that he had a signed piece of paper that said, you're in a 3-year deal with this, and it cut off after believe it was year 1 or year 2, and created a lot of problems for his business.
Yeah, I look, Blizzard is an awesome company to work with. We support Call of Duty League and Overwatch League at the Switch. Their vision is insane in like a great way. It's exciting. It's amazing to be a part of it as a fly on the wall and help support 86 live events around the world, which if coronavirus didn't happen would have happened. And I think they would have changed esports, and I think they still will. That's a company that's completely behind their leagues. They're behind Overwatch. They're behind Call of Duty. They're hiring really cool people like Joanna Ferris, who's frankly a badass, and they're going to do huge things. And hopefully we'll be here to support them. They've been an incredible client and partner. And I mean, 86 live events around the world is a lot. I mean, that's a lot to pull off. So I can't wait for coronavirus to be done and Blizzard does its thing, because I think it'll impress a lot of people. The thing with CGS is there was no outside funding, right? DirecTV was cutting that check themselves. Players were not being paid by an outside source. And with the Call of Duty and Overwatch League or ESL, the teams are responsible for funding themselves. And that's really the way it should be, because that's the way every other sport is. The league doesn't pay the players' salaries anywhere else.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, sorry, I had a thought and it disappeared. My mind's racing right now. There's so much that happened around this E-League thing. Sorry, around the Championship Gaming Series thing. And I guess the next one really is kind of E-League. E-League was launched by Turner, and it seemed to be quite a very similar format, but with the traditional teams that are were paying their own way. Like you said, and that was a live studio. There was teams from all over the world, including, once again, a team from Australia. There was a Renegades, who are now 100 Thieves, playing in that too. But that seemed to be a massive success. That was the first ever Twitch tournament to reach 1 million concurrent viewers, across the Western market. And, they continued on. And I think they've tapered off quite a bit, as to what they were doing previously with E-League. But I'd be interested to see, from you, obviously you didn't work with E-League in the back end, but sitting from the front end of that, did they fix a lot of those problems that CGS made in the past? And, is there still room for, a live studio audience franchise style league?
Yes and yes. I think they absolutely fixed some problems. I was just a viewer of E-League, but I'm also a gigantic Counter-Strike fan. And they did it the right way. Look, you have teams that are independently owned that came to compete in a Valve-sanctioned tournament with certain rules, certain format. You're not changing the format. You're just upping the production level, realistically. And I think esports can benefit for that. I don't like it when people in esports are resistant to traditional sports. And we don't have to take everything from traditional sports, obviously, but we can learn from each other. Traditional sports can learn from esports. Esports can learn from traditional. They can help us up our game. We can help them innovate in sports that don't necessarily innovate. Um, so it's got to be a symbiotic relationship. So I thought E-League did a great job.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. So there's just a few discussions coming through, like in the chat as well. Some questions from William Davis. We've got Scott Bodansky joining in the conversation, and Nick B as well. And he was asking when we will see the triumphant return of JMC, and we'll see them take a championship. That was obviously the first team that you mentioned today.
Yeah, so Jack's Money Crew was, I'm going to go ahead and just say, the best team in North American history. I mean, not based off wins or anything, but based off heart and spirit. We were honestly largely considered like the third best team all the time, and we were sort of the little giants. And there was complexity in 3D that had these big salaries, and then JMC, like, we managed to like win tournaments and then we'd lose players, and we'd win tournaments again and we'd lose players. So a lot of heart in that team. When we see him come back, I don't think you'll ever see me run a team again, but hey, never say never.
So you obviously competed against Complexity for a long time, and then you if you can't beat them, join them. So you did join them. So what was that development like over the years with you working at Complexity, in esports over those 6 to 10 years?
And I mean, just for the record, we did knock them out of CPL 2005, so we could beat them. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, look, after CGS, the world was on fire, the world of esports, and so there wasn't enough sponsors for Jason Lake to have a team and me to have a team. And we talked about it, and we said, look, we're really, really good friends. We're amazing friends to this day. I was actually texting with him the other day. So let's do this together. He's like, I have 2 kids. I can't do the traveling stuff. I was still pretty young at the time. I was 21. Going around the world with the team sounded awesome. I had a good eye for talent. Jason is obviously an incredibly respected former lawyer. And so we just combined forces with Jason Bass, who also deserves a ton of credit for just kind of being behind the scenes and keeping it chill. Because as everyone that's seen, Lake and I we're excitable guys. And it was a blast, man. We had some amazing squads come out of that. We had the legendary Call of Duty squad that won like 11 tournaments in a row. We had the number 1 and number 2 World of Warcraft teams in the world, and Reckful actually played for us. Obviously, it was very sad news about him, but traveled around the world with Byron for a while. And just all those guys had such heart. We were able to get some amazing brand deals from amazing partners and get a product line in Best Buy. So being able to have a Complexity product line where we put that deal together collectively was incredibly cool to be able to go into Best Buy and see our logo. So it was a crazy ride. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, after CGS, you went from having everything taken care of to just, all right, let's start over, and then building back up. You can't see my hand, but I'm doing this with the other side. And it was a hell of a ride. And to end it with, at least end my involvement with the sale to the Dallas Cowboys, I don't think you could ask for a better end of that story. And Lake's over there still doing his thing. I see him whenever I'm in Dallas. I'm actually moving to Dallas in 2 weeks, so we'll see even more of him. And I'm incredibly proud of what he's accomplished. And in my opinion, have the best Counter-Strike team in the world right now. And he promised people they'd get back there. So go Complexity.
Yeah, I'd say if Complexity has nothing if not heart and passion, over those years. And I implore anyone who's listening, especially back to the
audio.
Have you? No, you haven't got me?
Give me 1 second. Try again.
It's okay. Yeah, you got me now. Let's have a look. Live. Yeah, I seem to still have audio on my side.
There we go. I got it.
Yeah, you got me back. Yeah, so I was saying that complexity seems to have nothing if not heart and passion, over these years. And I'd implore anyone, who's listening to the recording or if you're watching live right now, do it a bit later. Take a look at Jason Lake live at Counter-Strike tournaments, known as a man for getting extremely excited, slapping the back of chairs and firing up his players as much as possible.
But that's Lake, man, and it's, a lot of people asked us like, is that all for the cameras? We'd watch a Counter-Strike tournament in a hotel room together with no cameras, and we'd be going nuts. I mean, that's the guy's just got so much heart. He was an amazing guy to
Yeah.
work with. He's an amazing friend. And look, Complexity is successful because of Jason Lake.
Mm. And talking to some of my friends who've sold part or all of their esports teams, it's quite common for them to come to me and say, "Chris, I've got 6, 7, 8 offers on the table here of different people that would like to invest and work with us." And I would say as a guest, Complexity is probably pretty much in a similar situation. So why someone like the Dallas Cowboys? Like why an NFL team versus some VC investment versus maybe an agency is quite common to want to buy into the space, or a media or multinational company.
Yeah, I mean, look, we had offers. It was a gold rush 3 years ago in esports. People were just throwing cash in and getting ready to hop on that train. Um, I mean, look, at the end of the day, the Dallas Cowboys is the most valuable sports franchise in the world. They are the number one most valued sports franchise in any sport in the world.
Mm.
So to be associated with them, I knew I was leaving. So obviously, I wanted that on my resume. I wanted the team to be in good hands. They presented a plan. I think they took Lake on the helicopter a few times, which helped too. But they presented a plan that was a true integration plan, where the players eat with the team and they have a facility at the Star. They have the same mental health as a team. They have the same access to physical coaching as a team. They were truly integrated in the Cowboys system. And look, the Cowboys came through on all of that. If you go to the Complexity facility and you see how well they're integrated into part of the Cowboys program, it is what every team in the world should strive for. The Cowboys don't screw around, right? And on anything that they do. Um, even if you go to their gift store, it's insane. So we knew we'd be in good shape, in good hands, and Jason's delivered championships like he told them he would, and they've treated him, I think, incredibly well. I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I think it's incredible what they've been able to accomplish and what they're going to continue to accomplish. And the partnership is really what people should strive for.
Yeah, and that possible, that full, collaboration seems to be something a lot of people have talked about, but not that many people have done. We've seen a lot of other teams around the world that have partnered in various levels with traditional sports teams, but yeah, you just never quite see that full integration.
Yeah, I mean the players aren't in the team locker room yet, but other than that, they're like this.
Yeah, fantastic.
might scare some of the guys. I'm just kidding.
So where do you see where do you see the future of esports heading to? Are there any current trends that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, viewership numbers are insane, and people can point to COVID, but 5 billion hours of Twitch watched in Q1. That's insane. That's amazing. I think esports fans are born every day, and fans of maybe more traditional sports, I don't want to say they die every day because it's very morbid, but they're not born every day. Esports is producing, five fans a second, or I mean, I'm making that stat up, but it is a rocket ship right now. Viewership numbers are going to continue to go up. Brands are taking it more seriously. They're learning how to integrate properly. People are learning how to broadcast it in a captivating way. They're activating their user bases in ways that no one else is doing. So, yeah, I see trends. I think this is a rocket ship. I'm incredibly proud to still be in this industry. I believe in this industry. I think the whole world believes in this industry. It's not a matter anymore. And, Nick B or Scott could tell you this, but back in the day, you had to convince people esports was a thing. Well, it's not an argument anymore. Esports is a thing. And you either get it and you know how to take advantage of it, integrate well, market correctly, or you don't. And that's fine. You don't have to get it. There's a lot of stuff I don't get. I don't understand cricket. Never will. But, doesn't mean cricket's not a thing.
That's pretty true. Yeah, it's a very similar response to what I give. It's a super common question for people outside the industry. Say, Chris, what do you say to a sports professional or a fan that says, esports is a joke, it doesn't exist? And say, well, I don't know, they're not my market, so I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
I don't watch swimming, I don't watch Formula One the same way that if they don't watch Counter-Strike, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean the viewership numbers are there and the money's there, so it's not a question is it a thing or does it exist? It does. It's the number one form of entertainment is video games, right? There's metrics there to support that.
What about esports at the Olympics? I'd love to get some of your opinion on that, pros and cons.
Yeah, I think as more esports fans are born, it's going to have to be part of the Olympics. It's part of the X Games. I was there for that. Pretty
Mm.
exciting. Um, I don't know in what capacity. I know ESL had a deal with the Olympics to do sort of a non-meddling side event that the
Mm.
Switch was going to support, and it's obviously COVID that got canceled.
That was the Intel back thing, was it? Like
Yeah,
pre-Olympic showing? Yeah.
exactly. It was like a 500K tournament. ESL's been another powerhouse in the space of gaming that's been around forever. And Craig Levine, obviously one of my best friends, just got named the CEO. Um, but the Switch has loved working with them. And I remember I had to go when I first got this job to like 9 events around the world to convince them to work with us because they, I frankly, I didn't really understand what my company did when I first started, but they just said, just keep showing up. So that's actually how I got to go to Australia and see your beautiful country.
Hey, there you
And I
go.
think I bothered them enough to the point where they gave us an event, and it, thank God, nothing lit on fire. And now, we have an amazing relationship with ESL, and I love the people over there. Um, I mean, it's just a really creative, outside the box company.
Mm.
Um, so I know they have a great relationship with the Olympic Committee, and I would just like to see that evolve.
The Olympics one is quite interesting to me because I guess if you look at another, large esports tournament of old that's, you know, isn't nowhere near as big as it used to be, which is the World Cyber Games. The format was always a kind of worrisome thing to me, where you could only have, one team or a certain amount of teams or representatives from each country, and they were landlocked, or region locked as to where the people were born, as to who they could play with. So that would mean that in CS 1.6, it was hard because a lot of the best teams in the world were from Sweden, but only one team was allowed to compete.
Right.
Or in StarCraft 2, which is another game that was in WCG, was hard because 9 out of 10 of the best players in the world are from Korea.
Right.
But they're locked there, and that's always my concern. With that traditional format, yes, it's great that it gives everyone an opportunity, but unfortunately, that doesn't create the best competitive integrity for a tournament, which then mightn't result in the best showing on screen, which means that not as many people are going to tune in and watch. Because if there's only one North American team that can compete, and right now that's complexity, well, it sucks because all the other organizations who are also competitive don't get a showing there whatsoever.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, complexity's got players from 3 different countries.
Yeah.
There's a player called Dominator that was my team captain on the Dallas Venom, and we joked that he literally got paid by 3D to play in one tournament a year because they had a player named Shagwar Griffin Banger who was unbelievable, but he was
Mm.
Canadian, so Shag could never play WCG. Um, Samsung was a big or Intel rather was a big partner for 3D, and I know Craig just said, I don't care how you guys play all year, just win WCG, get the spot. And every year they got the spot. Every year that was Josh's only tournament. And so when I finally got into play for me, it was awesome. But to your point, but then again, I mean that's how the Olympics works, right? So I don't have a huge problem with that format.
Mm.
And I think it's just a matter of time as esports numbers go up that people will include it in everything.
Yeah, and I guess a super common tagline you see online a lot is, we don't need the Olympics needs us. But yeah, I think it's, I think it's an interesting point. For me, I was, I guess would say pretty adamantly anti-Olympics a lot of the time due to, I think a lot of the public PR presence was them coming in saying, okay, look, esports kids, we know how to run this stuff. We're going to tell you how it goes, which we obviously know doesn't work. We just spent 20 minutes talking about that, with DirecTV and the CGS. Right. But yeah, I think there's some format problems that need to come around, and also I think there's the monetization aspect and the money values behind it that a lot of people don't understand. Talking to traditional sports people who ask me why it's not in the Olympics yet, explaining to them that League of Legends has a financial gain to being in the Olympics over Dota 2, for example. It's a free game to play, but they're making money in the back end through microtransactions. So how does that work? Are they paying to be in there? But then you don't need to, does running or high jump or pole vaulting need to pay to be in the Olympics? And I think that creates like an extra level of complexity because of the commercialization aspect behind it that a lot of these other sports don't go through.
No, absolutely. I think that's spot on.
Yeah, for sure. So, other trends coming up in the esports space I'd love to talk to you about is kind of like the blurring the lines between esports and gaming. Something that didn't exist in the past is battle royales, and I think that they've done this quite a lot. And you see a lot of the older hats in the industry, complaining about Fortnite not being a real esport and just being for kids and things like that too. But I think they've reinvented the industry so much where you could make an argument that Ninja's an esports athlete, because while he's an entertainer, I mean, if you're taking it at face value, he's competed in tournaments, he's won cash and he's placed highly. And if you look at a lot of these larger organizations like 100 Thieves and FaZe Clan, for example, they almost don't even operate as an esports team these days. How often do you see FaZe tweeting about their esports organization, or compared to tweeting about Banks and Rain and Adapt and Lambos and Gucci and things like that too? I'd be interested to learn from you. Complexity to me seems to sit, I'd say there's probably like a sliding scale where you've got like Fnatic, Complexity, Cloud9, EG on the sports team side. I feel like maybe you've got 100 Thieves, which is sitting in the middle, which is a little bit between the both. And then you've got FaZe Clan on the left, which, respectfully, and I've said this to their face as well, they're almost not even an esports team. I'd be really interested to learn from you, like how you see that developing.
I think based off their Counter-Strike team salaries, they might disagree that they're not an esports team, but
almost. I say almost.
Yeah, look, esports teams have evolved into full entertainment studios, right? You're producing content, you're producing apparel, you're doing fan interaction series, and I love that. I love that esports teams have the resources to pull all that off, because the people that run these things are incredibly smart and creative. I think a lot of my friends from back in the day have become grumpy old men, and they say, "Oh, Fortnite's not an esport." Well, a lot of people watch it, so the numbers are there. So it's an esport. It's not Counter-Strike. To the Ninja thing, I think Ninja's incredibly talented, and what he's done is propelled the entire industry. Honestly, I don't know if he would even call himself an esports athlete. I think he would just say he's an entertainer and a gamer, and that's totally okay. I think someone that's an esports athlete or an esports player, whatever term you want to use, has to be actively competing. And that's their job. Ninja's job is to entertain millions upon millions of people, and he does it incredibly well. A guy like Fallen's job is to be an esports athlete. And so I think there's a differentiator there. But again, not all gamers need to be esports athletes. Not all esports athletes need to play a ton of different video games. I mean, when people play Counter-Strike, a lot of my Counter-Strike friends just play Counter-Strike, right? So they're focused on their job. But obviously the two industries are going to rise together.
Yeah, that's really true. And, I feel like, especially with games like Fortnite, the lines are just so much more blurred than ever before. These people that are winning tournaments are creating just as much content as they are playing in tournaments. If you look at like a Benji Fishy, for example, or a Booger, streaming, multiple days a week while also playing in these tournaments at the same time. But, it opens up those alternative revenue streams that was never available, to the CS 1.6 players back in 2005.
Yeah, definitely not.
There's a little bit more money flowing around today, with a $40 million tournament.
Small amount.
Yeah, exactly. And, I always think it's super important, because I feel like a lot of people in the esports market, and I had exactly this too, right? Like I was saying, okay, I'm going to quit my job at Corsair. I'm going to convince brands to invest into esports because it's the next biggest thing. It's hot. It's growing. Like, yes, that's all true. But like you were saying as well, it is a bit of a buzzword. And I think if you're looking at the numbers, the blurring only helps us, because gaming is a $153-ish billion market globally. Totally. Esports is a $1.1 billion market. So if nothing else, if you want to make a unicorn company, you can't really have a $1 billion company in a $1.1 billion market unless you own 90% of everything that's going on, which is impossible. You can't own all the teams and the leagues and the players at the same time. So it makes sense, to blur. And looking at the incomes from a lot of these teams, I'm really glad you said what you said before, which is that a team, it isn't just a gaming team. They're a talent management agency. They're a media hub. They're also, an agency in themselves. And now they're an influence agency too on top of that. And, there's so much more that goes into an esports team these days.
Absolutely. I mean, these players are marketing vehicles. They're rock stars. They're again, it's not that the players from back in the day were bad guys or less entertaining. In a lot of cases, I'll be honest, I think they were more entertaining, but they didn't have the same outlets to express themselves.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, I would implore anyone to go back, and take a look at some of the videos, as to the old beige CRT monitors, people kicking it in CS 1.6 back in the old CPL days, because I think there's a lot to learn, and I think there's a lot to learn from the CGS. We saw that semi reinvented with E-League, and I'd love to see some similar, and more concepts like that in the future. But, I think, for anyone who's watching this, please just go back and do a little bit of looking. Esports, I think, was a lot bigger than what we give credit for. Looking at the amount of money that Fatality was able to win and world championships, looking at, Thresh winning a twin turbo Ferrari, in a Quake tournament, arguably one of the first ever. Yeah, exactly. Winning the CEO's Ferrari directly, for winning a tournament, and not, was it the story like you didn't have enough money to be able to ship it home or to pay the taxes to own the car?
Taxes on it were nuts, but it was
and insurance, obviously. So, looking at esports of old, I really feel like, the industry was already massive, but it took a little bit of a dive, and now it's been built maybe a little bit more sustainably, with people like Riot Games backing it, Valve now actually paying and putting their checkbook behind what's going on, games like Fortnite coming out and reinventing the space. Like you said, esports is here to stay, but I think there's a lot that we can learn from the past, and I'd love to see some reinvention of some ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And my new role at the Switch has been exciting because I'm working with the leagues and the tournaments and not as much the teams. I mean, teams are still our clients. We basically support live events, right? So we get a signal from point A to point B. We just released a very robust cloud-based production solution. So in a COVID world, that's amazing. We can produce an entire event from the cloud. So the people we work with and the level that they think at and they dream at and they plan at is incredible. And it gives me an incredible amount of hope for esports. And thank God we have engineers that are way smarter than me, which not the hardest thing to do, but really a lot smarter than me, figuring out solutions for these guys. Cause they're like, we want to have 86 events in 86 different places around the world, make it happen. And we do. So it's cool to be on this side of the aisle. Obviously, having been on the team side, going to a tournament and not really being so invested in who wins as much as it's just being awesome. So I kind of view my role now as to continue to help grow esports and take these resources we have from a major sports and TV company, the Switch, and bring them into esports and just try and give them the tools to keep the growth sustainable.
Fantastic. So if anyone's watching now live on LinkedIn or listening back to the audio only podcast or watching the video, where can they follow you online and connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. Feel free to send me an invite here. I had a Twitter account, but I had to turn it off because after I did some Call of Duty hosting, the Call of Duty community got kind of mean towards me. I'm just kidding. Kind of, not really. So I'm not on Twitter anymore. Big LinkedIn guy. The switch.tv is our website. So you can see me there, and look forward to connecting with people. And at a tournament, you can always come up and say hi. I'll probably be there.
Fantastic, man. Well, I really enjoyed this esports history lesson, if nothing else. I learned a lot.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me. And obviously really good to connect with the people down under. I will say ESL Australia was one of the most fun events I've ever been to, and just seeing that the fan base down there, it's very real. I knew Scott was a psychopath, but I didn't know all you guys were, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, I think if I was to rank esports fans, especially CSGO fans, in level of nuts, I'd probably put Brazil number 1, but Australia is a very close number 2.
There was a guy at ESL Australia, ESL Sydney, IEM Sydney, that sold his car. He's Brazilian, sold his car to go watch MIBR and IEM Sydney, and I thought that was dedication.
Yeah, that's some pretty serious dedication. They could retain that number 1 spot there, that's for sure.
Yeah,
crazy,
totally, man.
Crazy. All right, thanks, mate, and thanks everyone, whether you're watching live now on LinkedIn, watching the video back, or listening to the audio-only version of the podcast. The podcasts are now coming out every Thursday Australian time, or should be early Thursday morning if you're in the US or the UK. Thanks for listening, guys. We've got plenty more content to come. Bye for now.